Vinny and I grew up in the television age. We grew up with television comedy, great sitcoms,
Golden
great
age.
shows. The golden age of television. I mean, I remember my brothers and I, we'd go down to the mailbox to look for the TV Guide because that's how you found out which comedians were going to be on television on the Ed Sullivan Show that week. So it was
And
very
which episode
important.
of your favorite show?
Which episode of your favorite shows? And that was, television was a big part of our lives. That's all we wanted to do. We wanted to watch television. Everything else was like getting in the way. Homework. We had to practice instruments and stuff like that. No, we just wanted to watch television.
And specifically comedy for I
comedy.
think both of us, right?
Comedy. We made it home to watch comedy. So, Vinny, what do you got?
Okay, well, there's so many, and I tried to, do a cross section. Of course, I'm sure I failed, but you can't go wrong with Seinfeld being one of the favorite comedies of all time. I challenge anyone to challenge me on that. It's an incredible show that was pretty great right from the beginning. So, Seinfeld, we had the Simpsons and Get Smart, but let's start with Seinfeld. Seinfeld was what was great about Seinfeld and Art. Remember when I did this thing at Comedy Central? When Seinfeld came on the air, the emphasis was, Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, they were stand-up comedians on the same circuit at the same level of success.
Right.
But maybe Jerry a little bit more, to the point where NBC went to Jerry and said, hey, we're interested in maybe doing something with you. And Jerry turned to Larry David to come up with an idea. And they make fun of it on the show itself, right? They address this. And Larry, they spent their days, they play at the Improv, and then they'd go to the Flame Diner on 9th Avenue, and they'd sit in the diner and talk. And Larry said, this is the show. You and I talking about, our lives and the bits that end up being in your act. And Jerry said at the time he was very influenced by Abbott and Costello, because Abbott and Costello had a TV show that opened up with Abbott and Costello coming to the curtain, talking about, their lives and doing a version of stand-up, what Jerry would do. And then the curtains would part, they'd jump into the episode that was somehow tied into what they talked about. And when we were at Comedy Central, Art, I remember when I did Abbott and Costello Meet Jerry Seinfeld, which was a marathon of Abbott and Costello shows hosted by Jerry Seinfeld. Anyway, we haven't even talked about the show itself. We love the show so much because it truly became a water cooler show for many generations. I remember my parents talking about last night's episode. Everybody had something. It had all the hallmarks, right? The catchphrases, Spongeworthy, right? She got the Jimmy legs, all those things. And every episode was really 4 episodes in one, different storylines, right, Art? You had the Elaine storyline. Yep. It's almost impossible to say, the storyline of Elaine with the sponges. What was Kramer's storyline in that episode? I couldn't tell you, because it could have been 10 different ones.
That show was so well put together and so well written and so completely crazy when you think about Kramer as a character. Mm-hmm. The nutty next door neighbor was a sort of a standard character in sitcoms, but I think Kramer took it to its ultimate conclusion.
It was based on a real
sliding in. Yeah, it was based on a real guy. But when he slid in every time as his entrance, every entrance was spectacular.
Yeah. All right.
He always had some crazy idea, the coffee table book about coffee table books. No, about coffee tables. And the man bra. Was that what it was called?
The man bar or the bro or the manzier. There was a debate on what they were going to call it.
Right. He was always like coming up with some crazy idea. I love that.
And then when he was tired of dealing with banks, with the blood, he was hoarding his own blood because he didn't want to give it to the blood bank because the bank fees were too high. Anyway, Seinfeld, we go on and on that, but we don't have really enough time. But
we just got to tell one more story because there is a little Comedy Central relationship to Seinfeld. You know what it is? You know what I'm talking about, Vinny? The Soup Man. The Soup
Man. The Soup Nazi.
The Soup Nazi episodes.
No soup for you.
One of the most famous episodes in the series, right? That got really talked about.
Right.
It was based on a soup guy that was around the corner from Comedy Central. And I remember once one of the on-air gals who worked in on-air coming back, one of the younger women, and she was crying and she was because she had been taken apart by this soup man.
Yeah, he yelled at her.
And we were like, are you
"What are you
kidding me?
talking
And she
about?"
goes, yeah, I just asked for something extra. And he said, no soup for you. And that was really what was going on. And they
was the
just,
real
they,
deal.
they pulled it right out of there. It was beautiful.
That was amazing. Yeah. So Seinfeld for
Yep,
many
Seinfeld.
reasons. Let's do Get Smart, Art. I know that was a
Get
favorite
Smart.
of yours.
Oh
I
my
loved
gosh.
it, but
you know what? I love Get Smart so much that I used to. This is true. I'd cut my last class in school when I was in high school and go back and watch the Get Smart reruns. So every day I saw Get Smart for my senior year of high school, and everything about it. I mean, talk about a sitcom that got into the zeitgeist. You know, the expressions that came out of there. Sorry about that, Chief. And would you believe?
Would you believe it? 3 weeks of Beethoven.
I find that hard to believe.
Would you believe 2 weeks of Bach?
The place is surrounded by the entire FBI. I find that somewhat difficult to believe. Would you believe a Boy Scout troop with, I mean,
an angry dog.
yeah, right. And I gotta say, a little shout out to 99, Barbara Feldman. Did you know, she was in the first episode. She was in the pilot episode, which was in black and white, and it was a little less comedic. She just played like this woman who was a really, really talented martial arts spy. She just basically protected and saved Max a couple of times. And she wasn't going to be in the rest of the show, but they got to the second episode and they said, wow, she's terrific. Let's bring her in. But she ended up being one of the world's great straight men. You know what I mean? Absolutely. She just with Don Adams. I remember some of the repartee where she just had to, basically roll her eyes or say, "Oh." Well,
you know what?
Max.
The great thing about her is like her version of rolling the eyes. Because if you did it too much, you're not a good straight man, right? Like
Right.
that's the incredible thing of people, unsung heroes like Bud Abbott and Dean Martin.
Right.
They were incredible straight men to their partners, and that's a great analogy, Art. She really was probably the first straight woman.
Yeah, she was perfect in it. The Cone of Silence as a recurring gag. I just got to say something about. Talk about getting into the zeitgeist. The Cone of Silence, which was they did the same gag over and over, and every time they did it, it worked.
What about the shoe phone?
The gag with the Cone of Silence. I gotta talk Cone of Silence here. Was Max would say, "Chief, this is very sensitive information. We need the Cone of Silence." And Max would say, and the chief would say, "Oh, come on, Max, the thing never works." And he said, No, this is important. So they bring down the Cone of Silence, and Max would say, "Well, Chief, here's what I think." And Chief would go, "Huh?" Because nobody could hear. And then Chief would say something, and Max would go, "What is it?" And it was every time over and over. But people still talk about the Cone of Silence. I was reading something in the New York Times, and they mentioned the Cone of Silence. I think people forgot where it came from. That's where it came from.
And the show
Amazing.
was co-created by Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks and Buck Henry, one of the great comedy writers of all time, who wrote The Graduate, by the way. The
That's
movie,
right.
The Graduate.
Based on a book, though. Let's talk about The Simpsons, another show in our top three. This iconic comedy show was actually born out of a comic strip that was developed as comedy shorts in the Tracy Ullman Show. Remember, Art?
Yep.
Which was a new Fox show. There was a new network called Fox at the time, and it was little interstitial pieces of comedy. And it took maybe a year or two to find its voice and its style. But the people that have written for that show over the years, over the decades, have done many, many things. It's a classic show. It's so funny. It's still relevant. The movie didn't do so well, which was surprising. And maybe because you figure you can get it every week in the right installments, right? In the right 30 minutes. But the characters are so great. In some ways, it's like the Honeymooners, right? And the Flintstones. Did you watch the Flintstones growing up, Art? You remember them?
Flintstones, which was a ripoff on the Honeymoon. Yeah, right. Love the Flintstones.
But I love how Marge is again an incredible straight woman to Homer. I mean, the most ridiculous. Any other wife would have left him 500 episodes ago. 600 episodes ago. But it's an incredible show. Even the minor
Bart,
characters.
the guest characters, you know, the guests on that show. Everybody guested on that show. Everybody in they had politicians, they had comedians, they had
Beatles. They had
right.
McCartney and George Harrison and Ringo were all.
That's a tribute to the show right there. I mean, how much is that embedded?
And the pedigree of James L. Brooks, who was the creator or co-creator of arguably another top 3 show, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. One of the alumni from The Simpsons art was Conan O'Brien. That's where he got his start. And then he ended up running for SNL and getting his own late night show, which he's done forever. But that episode, Marge versus the Monorail, is considered to talk about top three Simpsons episodes of all time. Just absolutely, just smart, but funny and silly funny, not like politically smart. I mean, just clever. I guess clever is the word. And it works on so many levels. And the music, great theme. Danny Elfman.
Watch the show. You won't believe how funny it is. I mean, that's all you can say about it. You know?
Trust us. Full refund if you don't agree with any of the things here on the list. So those are our 3 comedy iconic shows.